Cyril Ramaphosa was there with Nelson Mandela on every step of the road to that first election. He was chief negotiator for the African National Congress, hammering out an end to apartheid. He was chairman of South Africa's Constitutional Assembly. And it's no secret that Ramaphosa was Mandela's preferred successor. One day, he might yet be president. He's now deputy leader of the ANC, and he joined me from Johannesburg for his first interview since his mentor's death. Mr. Ramaphosa, welcome back to this program.
Thank you, Christiane. Welcome to talk to you again.
Reflect for me, if you will, on the passing of your brother-in-arms.
Well, this is a sad moment for all of us in South Africa, but it is also a moment for celebrating Nelson Mandela's life. He's been a father of the nation, the builder of the South African new nation, and he's been a mentor, a comrade, a friend, a reconciler, and he's been nearly everything to many South Africans.
But take me back to the moment when Nelson Mandela, behind bars, decided unilaterally to reach out to the apartheid government. Why and how did that happen?
Well, whilst he was in prison, he saw the conflict rising and rising on an annual basis between the oppressor and the oppressed, and he came to the conclusion that the only way this racial conflict could be resolved and the only way oppression could be stopped would be through negotiations between the African National Congress and the apartheid regime at the time. And he reached out to them. He reached out to P.W. Botha without even discussing it with his other colleagues in prison, with Oliver Tambo, who was in exile. And for some reason, he knew that they would trust him so much that they would know he would not be selling out or going out on a whim of his own.
Let me ask you specifically about those negotiations, because you have said that had Nelson Mandela been negotiating with Pik Botha, he was such a tough negotiator that it could have all collapsed, and yet F.W. de Klerk decided to roll with the punches. It was quite brutal, the negotiations.
The negotiations were not easy. They were quite tough, and anybody who has negotiated with Nelson Mandela or against Nelson Mandela, I would have felt a great pity for them, because whenever he negotiated, he made sure that he stuck to principle and he won the argument. But at the same time, he always gave an allowance to his counterparty to go away from the negotiating table, having obtained some measure of victory or something that he can sell to his side. So he was a negotiator par excellence.
And then you were the lead negotiator for the elections and for the political process. And you've been quoted as saying there was so much violence at the time that leading up to those elections, it was a miracle that that first democratic vote actually happened. Take us back to that moment.
The negotiations leading to the end and the defeat of apartheid were very difficult. They were engulfed by violence, but Nelson Mandela just stayed the course and said, the victory for all our people, even those who will have departed, would be to bring an end to the nightmare of apartheid. And it was a miracle.
Mr. Ramaphosa, you experienced the brutalities of apartheid, like so many of the black population. You and your family were forcibly resettled, and you went to the township of Soweto. Can you tell me what that was like, that experience of this brutal regime?
The apartheid regime's key cruel hallmark was not only in oppressing the majority of South Africans, but also enforcing its will on black South Africans. And that will was enforced through the jackboot, through removals, as they embarked on their social engineering. They moved people from where they had been born, where they had grown up, and moved them to the dusty, arid parts of the country. As they were trying to clean up Johannesburg, they moved people from a place called Sophia Town, Western Native Township, where I was born, and we were moved en masse. Trucks would just arrive in the morning and just load up everything that you possessed, destroyed the houses, and you were just moved because they were making way for white people to live peacefully without being disturbed by the presence of black people in a particular area. So their social engineering was so brutal, it was so cruel, where they degraded everybody's rights. Black people in South Africa knew no rights, no human rights, and their rights were violated on an ongoing basis. And that is something that was visited upon many South Africans through the length and the breadth of the country. Many will say during the removals, they lost their property, they lost their dignity, and they also lost their lives. That is how apartheid was so cruel.
And yet you've moved past that, but there still are so many challenges for South Africa. At this moment of tribute from all over the world, what are the challenges in the post-Mandela period?
He was the most amazing leader we've had, who was able to forgive not only his jailers, but also his oppressors. He has taught us to be a forgiving nation, and in the process, he has taught us to be that we should walk along the path of reconciliation. And the legacy that he leaves us overall is transformation. And this is the moment when, as we put him to rest, all of us as South Africans will be saying, let us reconcile, let us transform our country to properly build it into the South Africa of Nelson Mandela's dreams. That is the route that we are now going to walk.
Cyril Ramaphosa, thank you very much for joining me on this day.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much, Christiane.